In the last episode, Krysada Panusith Phounsiri took us on a journey from breakdancing on the streets of San Diego to national TV and the Las Vegas stage. Krysada is also a poet and tells of his experiences and the stories of his community through his writing. We start off part 2 of this inspiring interview with a recital of Krysada's poem, Sabay, Sabay.
Sabay, Sabay. You ever heard of a Lao party? Might be one going on right now. We Lao folks love that celebrating. Sifting through sunrise and slipping through sunset, we sing our favorite songs in our heads. It shortens time at work, cause we sabay, sabay. We force ourselves to sabay through the weekdays, so when weekend come, we too sabay to be sabay, while beer Lao gushes down as if a recession exists in our bellies, and we must stimulate our celebratory economy this weekend on our little cousin's birthday, where grandpas and grandmas get down Salawan style. Lao folks gotta play that music. Gives us an excuse to pick up microphones, clap our hands, and wave our wrists around and dance like how our aunties teach us. When the right song come, when the right keys of the can flute lifts our stress out our sleepless bodies, we always celebrating something, waiting for that weekend, coasting past jobs we hate, or waiting to grab jobs we don't have. It don't matter if our elders can't speak English. They singing like they own the land, where their voices reach, rejoicing over the smallest of happenings, and we all sabay real good. Thank you. Cheers. Happy New Year. Sabay di Pimay.
Well, you mentioned something else that was really cool, the poetry and the writing in your books, man. Let's dive into that because I listened to a few of them online and checked a few of them out. So tell us how you got into that, or tell us a little bit about that, I should say.
Cool. So I joined. I took a class called Poetry for the People in college, my freshman year at Berkeley. Before that, I did write poems like in elementary school and then a little bit in middle school, high school, but I didn't really have my voice. And like I told you, I kind of struggled with language in terms of I wasn't really, besides fantasy novels, I wasn't really into all of the things that were out there in terms of reading. But I started reading poets. June Jordan is an African American poet. She's one of the most prolific, one of the most celebrated and accomplished. And her style of poetry and the class that I took, she passed away by the time I got there, but her program lived on. Her words and her poetry and the people I studied really helped me understand what mattered to me in terms of identity, in terms of history, in terms of culture too. Because I grew up in this, but I felt like I had even more of a motivation to understand and unpack myself through poetry finally, because I didn't really want to write essays about this or memoir. Like I wanted to write poetry. So I started writing poetry about my family, my community, the refugee stories of my family, or me growing up in San Diego, those kinds of things. And it was all through the program where I studied poetry and I learned technique, but applying it and practicing it like the way I did through this program was just amazing. And that's what got me totally into writing and totally into the fact that I needed to write these poems because at the time no one else will, or at the time I didn't know anyone. And I'm not saying I'm the first guy. I definitely am not the first. One of my mentors was, shout outs to Brian Talwara and Nall also, and from Satu Press. But like me at the time, I had to write my people's stories. I had to write my family's stories. And now I felt like I found a tool to do it. You know, I found the medium, and that's why I kept writing. I stuck with the program. I became a teacher, a student teacher poet through the program, and was writing through there. And I went through, I did VONA, which is a Voice of New America, or Voices of New Americans. And I did other poetry programs, but I just kept writing, and to the point where I was able to get a manuscript together and start submitting. And that's around the time that I met Brian Talwoa through another connection, Tabi Suk. Tabi Suk had an awesome documentary, Narakun, The Betrayal.
The Betrayal.
Yeah. So that really opened my eyes because I was starting to see a lot of people, a lot of different folks that were older than me, that were like they were pioneers in their space, and they came to Cal, or they would come to Lao community events, because in the Bay I would go to a lot of Lao community events, and obviously in San Diego I'd be in all of them, right? Or like involved. So it was cool to see people doing different things in the scene, whether it was like music or documentary work, film work, and then poetry work. So Tabisu connected me with Brian. Brian, I already had my manuscript, I already wrote everything, and I was like submitting to different publishing houses, but I got rejected in probably all of them. And then that's when Satu Press came about, where they decided to take a chance. And I said, they're like, oh, you're not going to make money. I was like, I know that. I never wanted to anyway. Well, I mean, of course, I would love to get paid, but I think more importantly, I wanted to publish so that we could legitimize ourselves too, and say, hey, like, our stories matter, our voices matter. And then when the Lao-American Writer Summit came about, when I met you, Cole, that was the time that I debuted my first book. So that's how that's how the writing journey started. I was always writing, and I never felt happy with what I was writing early on in life. And then this program, I give credit to, and Marcos Ramirez, who was my mentor he was like my poet teacher mentor. He pushed me to say, you have something, this is a story, these are things that no one knows about. So why aren't you writing more, in terms of like the Lao-American identity? What is that? How do you impact that? How is it different from Asian American? And not like I want to like separate and label everything, but I also feel like because of who we are, there's not too many of us. So why not document, and why not represent and explain ourselves more? And that motivated me,
Yeah. I definitely get it, man. Like, I had a book, I did autobiography, and it wasn't really about making money. To me, it was actually therapeutic. It was healing for me.
Yeah.
Just to kind of let everything out, and here you go, and this is me. Right. So that was the main benefit that I saw from that. It's just like, man, I just started to heal, because me growing up in my adversity, which is why I created, why me and John created, this podcast, was it was like, it wasn't an easy road, right? I mean, it was like just, and it started from within my own family, right? And then you got the external, sources that were kind of against me. And I don't know, like when I finished that book, or even when I did the documentary, it was just, for me, it was just healing.
Yeah. And that's so important. And I feel like to other folks, like I think we come from a certain void too, especially here in the States, where we have like, we care about our homeland, but this is our home too. And we're so in between in how things are because we grew up here, but that's a whole identity within itself. And it's like, then you realize there's so many people that felt lost that way. And it's like, why not document this? Because there are people that are experiencing this, and we should always do better, or progress and move forward. Right. So like, to have that, I bet you, is healing, because now you're finally addressing certain things, even from growing up in your childhood. And me too, right? Like, I felt like there was so much, there were challenges, right? There were traumas, there were violence, the things that you grew up seeing, and personal challenges of like, how do you break from that? Or what do you become of that, right? And I think whatever medium we choose, whatever path we choose, if it's healing, then that's all that matters. Like, I worry less about the success and more about how did it make us go through our lives.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of sad, because, the generation before us are like, our parents, they had their own trauma, but they're more like, let's not talk about it. Right. Yep. I mean, it's just, we were taught, and they tried to pass. I know my family tried to pass it on to me. And I was like, I don't know. I had to, like, right apart of me, it's like, there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing wrong with talking about it. Actually, like I said, it's healing me. Let people know, because the world doesn't really know too much about the Lao culture, right? We are kind of stuck. We're literally stuck in between Thailand and Vietnam, right? To where like everybody knows, if you talk about Southeast Asia, that's what you think about. Or you think about the Philippines, Indonesia. But when it comes to Laos, it's like, who, what, and it's like, and I just felt that it was important to, to talk about our culture and, to share my story. But it's also like an opportunity to now, like you said the word pioneer, right? We're opening up the pathway for the future generation to, whether it be, breakdancing, whether it be bodybuilding, whether it be like just mental health. Like, I'd love to see, like, the younger generation kind of, just kind of pave that way for them, so they know that it's okay too. It's okay for them to say, hey, I want to be an athlete, even though my parents say, athletics, man. It's just like, well, there's no way you can do athletics. You're just physically, you're not able to. You're not physically as big. You're not physically strong enough. Why don't you do education? And that's what. And nothing wrong with education, but it's just, man, like, let your child dream. Like all your dreams, right? That you wanted to do, you were able to do it. So, when our parents, I'm not saying your parents, but like, okay, when my parents and a lot of other parents say, no, this is what you need to do, you can't do that. And unfortunately, a lot of people listen to their parents because it's an honor thing, right? You're disrespecting your family if you don't listen, right? I mean, that's the guilt trip. The guilt. Oh gosh, that's
and to them, I think there's still a sense of fear because they left as adults, right? They were the ones that left as adults, and there's this fear of like, oh, like maybe they're spying on us, or like maybe we talk too bad, we could never go back to Laos. Like there's this whole like, and then this whole idea of like, man, like we came to America, why are you worried about that? Like, why are you worried about Laos? It's like, if you grew up as a kid here, you would know why because you're constantly being asked about it. You're constantly having to address it, whether you like it or not. So it's like, respect to every generation before us, and there's gateways, right? They had a gateway, they gave us an opportunity, and now we have gateways, and we could give others the opportunity, and then like we could continually do that, because I do agree with you. Even putting Laos on the map is like it's still a challenge, and it's still something that the thing I like to see now is like there are even younger generations of folks now being completely all about it, super unapologetic about it, and really expressing themselves, right? And then we have to see it as like a good progression of the things that that we did, and the things that the leaders before us did too. So it's there, and
for sure.
I think, and my take on that too is just like dancing. I mean, I love dancing, but obviously I don't like everything. I mean, there's some things I don't like in terms of like maybe how people interpret certain things or certain styles or certain things that people do, but I'm gonna enjoy every moment of it and encourage them to continue to explore themselves. So I think same thing with the younger folks, the younger generation, Lao folks too. Like, we didn't completely figure things out, so we're not completely experts, and we still express ourselves. We still did our things, and I want to encourage the younger folks to do the same, even if you don't know. But like, definitely do your research and unpack your family story at the very least. But don't be afraid. We have to do something. Start somewhere.
That's what's exciting about the group of athletes that we're bringing to the SEA Games and then possibly some other games. They're all pretty much 18, 19, 20-ish type.
Okay.
They're, second, I don't know if you call them second or third type. Like my wife is a 1.5 like you, right? Like came as a child. But for the most part, grew up here. My daughter is a full-fledged second generation. She knows Laos from her grandparents, from New Year's parties at the temple and that, but has never been there, and neither have any of the other kids, or I should say
okay.
young adults that are going. For them, it's almost like a homecoming, a way to connect them with their culture, and sort of go full circle, right? We're coming back, we're joining hands with the local athlete, the local swimmer, there's other sports we're going to announce shortly, and kind of come back as one big family, compete together, and put Laos on the map. Instead, elevate their whole profile at the SEA Games. It's really going to be cool and exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely wish you all good luck and success. That's great that more people care about that too. Like the younger folks that want to compete too. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Krysada, one of the things you mentioned, telling of your experiences, one thing to put in a book, but like listening to your poem, Sabai Sabai, right? It's hard to put the emotion in a manuscript or a book, but the poem, right? You could feel it, and it could really connect you to the experience. So that's kind of what I loved about the poetry and the way you chose to sort of tell your stories and the stories of the community. So,
thank you. Have you seen the video that I did on it?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, great. Cool.
Yeah. So anybody watch it. It's on your YouTube channel. I'd encourage everybody to check it out. Really cool little video there.
Cool.
But tell us, so you have Dance Among Elephants in every passing minute. Is there a theme to those books? Do they kind of
yeah. The first book was a lot of it was there was a lot of unpacking. So the themes in my first book was again the Lao-American identity, stories of my family, like my aunts and uncles, their refugee stories that they would tell me, stuff about my grandpa, my family, right? Me growing up in San Diego. There were love poems, there were poems about jazz, there were poems about dancing, breaking. And I would say in terms of the energy, Dance Among Elephants was quite, the pace was urgent, I would say. Urgent in the need to express, but all the emotions. So Sabai Sabai was a beautiful, soothing poem, but it was also urgent that I had to show and write what it meant for me to be Sabai or what I experienced, right? So that was Dance Among Elephants. The energy was, I would say, again, urgent, high, a lot of things that I was afraid to unpack as well, but again, had to, right? Dance Among Elephants, I felt I will say it's like a sequel to it, where after some time, is that urgency there, or is it more reflective, more inside, I guess introspective, and it was. So the second book is it builds off the first book, same themes, but goes a little bit deeper in terms of now how is it that I really feel or what I really think about, what are these themes and in all these categories as well. So then and there were still poems about the refugee experience, but also about secret war in Laos, the UXOs, certain things that were haunting, but things that I had to, if I had to put it in a metaphor or analogy, like something I had to sit with. A lot of poems were things I had to sit with and think about, but not in this high energy, urgent manner. More like, let me sit at a bar and let me like really talk with you, whatever that theme was, right? So, and yeah, so the second book was a little bit more. It is a continuation, I would say.
Yeah.
So they have different energies, same themes but different energies, I would say.
Do you think these poems could be translated into Lao and have the same emotion and meaning, or would it be impossible?
I would love for that to be translated. I think I would have to work quite closely with the person that's translating. So I definitely wish I could do it in Lao. I just know my Lao isn't good.
Yeah. I'm just saying theoretically, right? Because of sometimes you can't convey it exactly the same. It won't rhyme. It won't, go together. If you just literally translate it, it may mean something different.
I think that's I took a class where it was all in Spanish. Like the poet wrote in Spanish, but I read the English portion. And same thing, right? Like there were people that knew Spanish and knew every intricacy part of it, and they would say, well, you know, he says it like this, but in English it says it like this. So there's always going to be that. But knowing that there's translations like that, I'd be open to having it translated. So it may not have the same effect, but it might just be little discrepancies of like our slang is different, or like what some of the things that we say is just different, right?
Yeah.
And I think those things would be hard to translate, but I'm sure they could find words for it.
Yeah, and this may come back as a funny question, but it's something I noticed, and I like the way you did it. But the people listening, so you said in the poem "Sabai Sabai," the beer lao flowing, and I felt that that kind of pulled it in, maybe connected the culture a little more. But the reality is, I saw a lot more Heineken flowing in San Diego when I lived there.
Oh, sure.
So, was there a reason you picked the beer lao versus the Heineken?
Yeah. I mean, it is true. Heineken was flowing everywhere, but I've started. As soon as I started drinking beer lao, I was like, nah, I gotta represent.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So like, and then for us, right? So it's funny because all over America, you go to any party, it's Heineken for sure, right?
Yeah.
But then for us, when I see beer lao, like my grin just gets even bigger. I'm like, oh, you got beer lao? Because the funny thing is, like, in Laos, like it's like the opposite, right? Like beer lao is everything, and then Heineken is like it's there. I mean, but beer lao is more apparent, right? So I was also trying to like, yeah, exactly, yeah, affordable, and a lot of people over there prefer Heineken, right? So for me, it was like, oh well, I mean, I'm also not just talking about Lao in America. I'm also talking about Lao too. So it's like, yeah, beer lao is gushing, and it definitely flows over there hard.
Okay, yeah, over there, yeah, you're right. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I do.
A small detail I noticed, so.
I'm glad you caught that. I mean, that's cool. Yeah, but definitely Heineken here in San Diego.
Yeah.
Well, tell us this. I mean, you have so much going on. How do you balance everything? And what advice do you have other people that are trying to do multiple things like this?
I would use this analogy or metaphor. So, early on, growing up, right, breaking was my main ship. Breaking was my main passion. It was the thing that I did once I fell in love with it. Like the number one thing, I trained every day that I could, or like I would set regiments. I would change my schedule around for breaking. Like that's how much I cared about it. Like even during, even for school, like I would cater and I would swap around student org meetings and lectures so that no one could bother me between the hours of 8 and 10 or 7 to 10 or whenever I trained, right? That's how dedicated you have to be, at least in one thing. The one thing that you're passionate about. Let that be the main ship, right? And then I had these little ships, right? Like poetry, photography, Lao community stuff too, where I always appreciated who I was, but like how can I connect more deeply? But it was like going little events here and there, experimenting, and then writing poetry and just exploring myself in other mediums, right? And I would let that grow, but this would lead the way. So this would be my ticket, right? If I traveled somewhere or people knew me as a dancer, but then I would meet others and connect with others in these other categories, and I would let it grow, give it time and be patient. So like, you don't have to set a hard regimen for exploring everything that you do. So I did everything, but I didn't sleep much either. So like, I would train and then I would study at night. A lot of my creative thoughts would come out at night, and you could push things out. Like you could push out your different art forms in different days, or again, you have to do it in, for me, I did it a lot in spurts too, right? So if I had a creative spurt, I would just write poetry, and then I wouldn't, like for a couple of days, a couple of weeks, like just let it drop. So like let the balance of your passions be natural. Follow your gut, but always, I'd say, find that one thing. And sometimes if you try really hard at that one thing you love, it could also be a good thing that you end up not loving it. And don't think of it as like a failure. Think of it more like, well, it led you to where maybe you want to see, right? Or where you want to end up. And if you still love it, then do it for yourself. Then you gotta compare your success to others, and you'll still do it forever, or as long as you can. And I say that because like some people want success in certain things, but sometimes you following that passion and letting it take you somewhere can lead you to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Which is actually great, right? And that's what happened. So with breaking, I started meeting other creatives at competitions and at events. I started meeting other creatives in other spaces. And then I would meet full-fledged like professionals in those spaces and just talking to them, picking their brain, or just having like conversations about, you know, how like, oh, you do photography, you shoot breaking events. How'd you get into that? You know, and then just picking like maybe not long conversations, but even just quick ones, and then broadening your perspective, and then using that one thing for me was breaking, traveling the world and seeing those kinds of perspectives, right? While letting these little things grow. And then when I finally got to a point where I felt like I use a lot of the metaphors in dance, the way I trained and the way I approached it in the same manner of these other forms. So then I knew when to give it time. I knew when to train it. I knew when to focus on the technique of the art form versus expressing and actually delivering it or showing it or expressing it, right? And this was a long, I mean, all these things didn't come overnight, right? Like they took years. But I would say now, because these are no longer little ships, they're all kind of equal now, they're all sailing together, then I would say it's getting a little bit more difficult to balance everything. But I would say back then, you know, I would work, train, and then do the other forms when I felt like it, or switch it around. Maybe I would write poems super late at night before I go to sleep, you know, or I would like study some clips on photography late at night after training, and then rinse and repeat. Go to work the next day, do my job, learn in an engineering space, and then just. But you have to have that kind of dedication early on when you have that kind of energy, and you're exploring yourself at the early stages to the mid stages of your path. And then now it's because they all sell at the same time. Now you could pick and choose, right?
Yeah,
you have the liberty.
Great. Yeah, great
So
advice.
I hope that helps. Like,
oh yeah, great advice.
because I don't want people spending.
It's hard sometimes when people do one thing, you know. So when here you are balancing, you know, 3-4 different things. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love that because I felt like I don't feel like I'm whole if I just do that one thing. And I always knew breaking wasn't that one thing. I'm just saying like it was the one passion, the one thing that was for me I loved the most, and it was the strongest. But as my buddy Motion would say, you know, it's a finger to a fist, right? To make a fist, you gotta have like more than one thing. So and I love the fact that we're all human, so we have so many different interests beyond the one thing that we liked. And it's always like, even with dancers, some people feel afraid to explore other things because they would look or appear lesser than what they were. And I'm like, drop that, you know, drop the ego, drop the what you think of yourself, and think more about feeling alive when you express yourself. Because all these moments, man, they don't come back, right? They come and they go. And you shouldn't wait for the perfect moment to express these things that you are curious in. And I was always curious. So like, I want to try it. Laugh at me all you want, you know, like what is that?
If you wait for that perfect moment, it never comes, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, make your mistakes.
That's exciting, man. So, well, hey, Krysada, this is great. This is one of our funnest interviews, no doubt. We're going to wrap up here, but where can people follow your journey online?
Oh, great. Well, first off, thank you too for having me. Really appreciate telling my story. It's been a long time since I've sat down like this, actually. So it was good. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak upon this.
You're welcome. It's a great story, man.
Thank you. You could find my personal, I'm mainly on social media on Instagram. So Krysada_Binley. That's my personal. Krysada_Binley. And then my photography is Snap Pilots. So Snap and pilots spelled correctly. One word, Snap Pilots. And then I have another one called Lao-America. And that's where I wanted to give more space to document and unpack a lot of the photography that I've photographed in the community, but also artists in the community. That again, that's a little tugboat right now, like, but I wanted to grow naturally. So that's something I started maybe a year and a half ago. But you can find me on those 3 socials. And then you can find my book if you type in Krysada Panusith Phounsiri at the satu.press website. So those are still available.
Who owns that again?
No.
No. How's he doing? He's out in California, right?
Yeah. I think the pandemic did a number on the press and on us, and I think we're slowly starting to see what's next. So I think for me personally, like, I was like, I'm not even sure about book number 3 because I just want to deal with my own personal things and actually just enjoy life. Like, I just want to currently travel and have fun because I feel like we were so stuck, So, and Noah is really trying to pursue his own art space as well, because outside of Satu Press, he does his own art and illustration and storytelling, just even outside of Satu Press. So I think it right now is a good time for us to, I would say, not separate, but like grow in our own spaces again, and then naturally come back when things are ready to do so, right? Whether it's like either another big summit, which isn't in the table yet, but like, again, I think all the folks that are barely coming out again are just trying to grow in their spaces again and find a place. And then that's when we'll probably come back eventually. If not us, then we could train, future generation folks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but that's what he's been up to. Yeah. He's doing a lot of his own thing. So.
Cool. Well, yeah, John, you got any final words?
No, thanks a lot, Krysada. It's been a great interview.
Yeah, thank you too. All right, Cole and John, peace.
All right,
And Happy New Year.
Yeah,
Happy New Year,
Happy New Year
for
again
sure.
in April.
The C4 podcast is brought to you by the Lao-American Sports Hall of Fame. Visit us on the web at laoamericansports.com, celebrating the first, inspiring the next.